Jai Guru, everyone.
Jai Guru, and welcome to this episode of Yogananda podcast, where we talk all things Yogananda and SRF. And today we'll be talking about the second part of chapter 7 of the Autobiography of Yogi, and we'll be going through it line by line. So if you haven't followed at all, this is the first time listening, welcome. But you can, of course, go back and listen to the beginning of the recordings and follow along with us. So today we'll be starting where we left off from last episode, the first part of the chapter, the levitating saint. And you can follow with us, and you can start from the sorry, let me just bring it up to make sure. On my way home from school that afternoon, and you can read all the way down to his large lotus eyes held a hidden divine laughter. So we can sort of take a moment, pause, let you read, catch up, and you can join us on the journey. We should hopefully try to cover it within the hour, but let's see. So a quick update from me. I last week did a silent retreat as part of the Convocation follow along with a little group outside of London. I actually thought it was just outside of London. It turned out it was Plymouth, outside of Plymouth. And I, thought, I'll get a taxi. It turned out, no, you had to really plan that trip.
Did you take a train there, Chris?
It turned out, shout out to a friend of mine, Julius. Julius happened to go to Swindon, so I ended up, he gave me a lift. So I got a cushy ride in the car.
I was hoping you'd say yes, because I once re-signaled that line, so then you would have had to thank me personally.
I know people that did, so gratitude is there for my fellow devotees who did train in and out of London. But it was lovely. And of course, it was Convocation week. So this is the first podcast that we've done since then. So I thought take a minute to reflect on Convocation. It was probably the first Convocation I've followed to the T, like to the letter. I tuned into every single talk. Of course, it was all scheduled by the lovely organizers of the retreat, all SRF folks. So yeah, really, really well scheduled. And if nobody's done a retreat before listening to this, I can't recommend it enough. We'll talk about some reflections on the Convocation itself, but that was my first retreat, and I did it silent. So everybody else, actually, there were maybe 30, 40 people there. They were following, observing silence until, say, the end of lunch. That wasn't uber strict. Sometimes you heard a word here or there, but in general, it was silence until the end, after lunchtime, which was really beautiful. I've never done that before. I'm Irish. We tend to be known for talking. The stereotypical talk a leg off the stool is probably quite true. But I did it for the whole week, and it was beautiful. You can really observe the mind and everything that rattles around in there. So really, really recommend it. And of course, following for Convocation was very special. And, we can pause here just for reflections. If you guys followed along at all, or was able to maybe even attend an event at all. I know a couple of you here, we're doing some pleasant, event organizing and participation in the London Centre. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about that as well.
Yeah, we had, so if you watched Brother Chidananda's closing talk, he introduced all the monastics that went to all the various centres, and we had Brother Bhimananda and Brahmachari Roberto in our London centre to introduce us, take us through the first half of Convocation, and we listened to some of the talks live and meditated together with the meditations, and Lauren and I were there for almost all of it, serving, and Lauren is now a full-fledged technical person at the centre now. She's been promoted from previous role.
I don't know about that, but I tell you what, it was an absolute joy to serve. We were talking about this in our young adults meeting on Sunday, but it was the first time I'd ever really served so much in that capacity for an extended period of time. I was there Tuesday to Tuesday, pretty much upon the days that obviously we weren't doing anything. It was such a joy to see everyone there together, and actually being of service to others in that week is just so special. So I feel very, very blessed to have been asked. So thank you, Briac, for that.
Fulfilling your seva, your service, dutiful service to the master. Yeah, it's nice, very, very rewarding, isn't it, Briac?
I found it it was very rewarding. Yeah, we had a special satsang as well, young adult satsang with the monks, which was really nice, which Lauren organized as well. And we we had lots of people raised questions to ask in the satsang, and then we went through it. And one really cool story I'll share. And it was someone asked, "Oh, I read the lessons, and then next week I've forgotten about it, and then how much of all this studying of the teachings is really it's really going in. Is there any point if I'm just forgetting about it? And next time I reread it, it feels brand new." That kind of a question. I probably added my own elements to that question that weren't there, but yeah, you get the picture. Anyway, so Brother Bhimananda, he gave a example of using a story. So he was saying that a guru once was training his disciple, and he asked him to fill a tank with water using a bucket. So it's on the top of the hill, and he gave him a bucket, and the bucket was filthy and had holes in it. So he had to walk down to the lake, which is near the bottom of the hill, fill up the water in the bucket, and walk up the hill and empty it into the pot or whatever. And by the time he'd get there, with holes, obviously it would be empty. And so he thought, Guruji's asked me, let me persevere. So he goes back and forth, and then he's not much has gone in. So frustrated, he goes to the Guru and saying, I tried my best, but you've given me an impossible task. And the Guru says, yeah, you may have failed in filling the bucket, but look how clean. Sorry, look, you may have failed in filling the tank, but look how clean your bucket has become. And he said that's related to Guruji's advice to us, or assurance, where if you just take 1% of what I've given you, then that's all you'll need to find God in this life, which I thought was a really good story. But the convocation videos were so good, and this time I think they'd really added really good elements of humor. I mean, some of them I was actually laughing out loud.
Yes.
And some of them really you wouldn't expect it as well. Like Sister Brahmani's talk on quiet, the power of silence. Just this little bit was quite poignant. Listen to this.
So there's another one that's come into our world in the last couple of decades, and that is our cell phones. And I want to make a point of this because devotees are not exempt from cell phone addiction. I have seen devotees pull out their cell phone during a meditation and start checking their email. This is not okay. Can you do 1 hour without the phone? That phone is so addictive. It connects us to people. It's wonderful. I like my phone. It connects you to people. You can do your work on it and so forth. But when you find that you can't turn it off for a while, you can't be away from it for a while, watch out, because
so it was like her whole talk was so serious, and then she just added these threads of just hilarity. It was so good, and it was obviously a really serious topic because of our addiction to phones is quite bad, isn't it? So yeah, and brother Govindananda's talk was hilarious. Like his talk on loyalty, and Brother Sivananda's talk as well was equally quite funny. So like they really made the effort on some of the talks to really engage in the audience.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it maybe they let their personalities show as well, like reflect, because it was very natural, wasn't it? It wasn't like they were, trying to try out some, comedic, flair, and they're trying some lines out at a comedy club. It was just very natural, in line with what they were talking about as well. So
Even even some of the serious classes, like I was just listening to the energization one today, which you can get on the portal, and then the app is not on YouTube. And I was driving to work and listening to it, and obviously I couldn't practice it whilst I was listening as a workshop. But just two or three times, it made it so I was laughing out loud in the car, and
yeah,
people like next to me in the traffic jam. What is this guy? He's suddenly going from like stoic silence to like complete like out of control laughter. But that's what it
yeah,
was. It was so good.
yeah. There was uproar with the folks at the retreat. Like we were all just laughing, turn to look at each other. It's very, yeah, it made for a really nice sort of learning experience as well. But I suppose my reflections, just to kind of touch on it myself, and takeaways, and it's not in any particular order. Just before the podcast, I did, write down a few of my key takeaways. The first one probably is in the right order, and it's to prioritize God and meditation / make time for God, to really simply do that. And there's no questions about it. Sometimes it's easy to say, well, kind of busy. That was something that I really took away from. And linked to that was make plans for, I put all of the above, but I'll read a few of these out as well. So make plans that actually try to plan the week out ahead of time, 1 week ahead of time, 2 weeks. It's a very powerful tool, apparently used, I think it was by, hopefully somebody can fact check this for me, Sri Muralini Mata used this technique a lot to really plan her schedule. She had obviously a pretty hectic schedule. I can't hold a candle to it, but she made it work for her. So I think I could probably do that for me. And there's reward for trying. Sometimes when you're in meditations and you're like, I don't know if I really, nailed that one. You still have a lot of reward for trying, and they kind of hit that home in a couple of the talks as well. So that's something to take away to continue with the motivation at times. But that the Guru loves each and every one of us, and that the Guru will be with us and will never fail us. There was a beautiful story about, I'll summarize it very quickly, about the village people wanted to know what was beyond a wall. It was a great story. And nobody knew what was beyond this wall. And, they tried to get up this wall and they couldn't, but eventually one of them did. And as soon as they got up this wall, they said, oh, oh my God, how beautiful. And they just dived over on the other side and never to come back. Second one did exactly the same thing, managed to climb, got to the top of the wall, looked over, said, oh, how beautiful. And they dived in. And, the story went, and the villagers were like, well, hold on a second. We don't know what's over the other side of the wall. Nobody told us. Nobody came back. But eventually, the first one did come back. The first successful person did come back and said, hey guys, you've got to get over that wall. It's so beautiful over there. It's plentiful. It's heaven essentially. But didn't actually tell them how to get up. And instead they returned. And then the second person came back and said the exact same thing. It's beautiful. It's plentiful. The colors are amazing. It's heavenly. And here's exactly how to get back. This is exactly where to put your feet and your hands. And here's the track. And it's where you need to be careful about. They caught the people when they fell. They encouraged them, they encouraged them to get back up on the wall to try to climb. And that's what the Guru does for us. That's the metaphor of the story. So that was something really stuck with me. It was a very beautiful appreciation for the Guru.
Brother Kamalananda's talk on Guru,
Yeah.
the Messenger of God. We'll put a link to that on there.
Yeah. We've got a couple of references here of some of the amazing talks. We'll try to get them. I think they're on the app though, right? Because
no, they're on
they're not.
YouTube.
Are they all?
Most of them are on YouTube. The ones we've
Yeah.
discussed are, yeah.
Yeah, good. Yeah, we can link them. And then, how important long meditation is and retreats are. So I realized it's a necessity for me to do the week-long retreats to be able to get these 3-hour meditations in, multiples every, for days on end. It's so rewarding. And then how important silence is. And on that note, I thought, let's actually do a moment of silence. It's a podcast, so we're not going to go crazy on this. And actually do something that Sister Brahmani said to do. And when I was making notes, I asterisked it and said for the podcast. And it's to sit in silence and close your eyes and focus at the point between the eyebrows. And we can do this now. And if you're listening, you can join us. So close your eyes, focus at the point between the eyebrows. Take a deep breath, inhale and exhale as we do the double exhalation. And mentally chant, for God and Guru, for God and Guru, for God and Guru. And that's just a very quick little practice to be in silence and then carry on with your day. So we can do that for the podcast. We do this for God, for Guru, and that's our seva, that's our service. You can do that for everything, right? You're whatever you're doing, whether you're even, practicing some physical hygiene or something, even something so mundane that we do every day. We're brushing our teeth or something. We're doing this for ultimately our purpose on earth, which is to get back to God. So yeah, we'll do that. Try to do that more often, shall we? Priyank?
Thank you, Chris. That was a really beautifully led meditation. This meditation format will probably work on the podcast because there's an option on podcast that skips silences. So people will just, people that aren't into it can press that button. But I thought that was really good meditation, and I really liked that bit of her talk as well. And so much so that I got back into, remember ages ago I told you my watch has got an hour beeper, and I thought this like 2 days ago I restarted doing this. So I've now every hour I've been doing that exact meditation every hour. And exactly right, Chris, you heard it whilst we were doing it, the beeper went off, and I was like, oh, how cool is this? This has been happening, like so many synchronicities in this convocation. It was just phenomenal.
Yeah.
You guys must have heard it as well. That's pretty cool. And the other thing was the importance of retreats. I need to really get into that because my wife and I told you guys we have quite like my garden and where we live is in nature, and Sister Brahmani said spend time and absorb the energy of the stillness of nature and get out there. So we do that regularly, but we don't spend much time in silence. So my wife said, we've got everything we need here, we don't need to go to these retreats, because there's usually a long waiting list for people that go to these retreats, and we're taking up a spot when we've actually got everything we need here. We could do it at home. So I said, okay, let's try it. So then this last retreat, we skipped it, and we thought we'd do it at home. And then we set aside the exact routine that the meditation retreat is, exactly that. And we were going to do it at home. But then 3 or 4 things happened, and then we couldn't do it. Yep. And then the next week, we'll just push it back a week. And now every week is being pushed back. So I think we need to go back now to actually going to this retreat, because this is not good enough.
Yeah, the retreat was 6:30 in the morning, sometimes 8 o'clock at night, and then breakfast, lunch, and dinner was kind of served, which was pretty handy. But it was pretty full on, which was exactly what you want, So yeah, so that's a little summary of Convocation. I was so happy to see Mike actually there. I was looking out for him in every single talk. Text, Mike, were you, in the 5th row? Was that you? And finally we saw him. I think it was at Sister Brahmani's talk on silence. He was sitting in the 5th row. So shout out to Mike. He's not with us today. He can't join us.
Did you
Um,
WhatsApp to him to tell him to look back and say hi to podcasters?
well, because we were doing the retreat in the UK, we only managed to tune in for a few live broadcasts.
Yeah.
So most of them were recorded. Yeah. Otherwise, I definitely would have, and then he would have got told off or looking at his phone in the talk that
Sister
was
Brahmani told him
specifically
not to.
specifically about not looking at your phone.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that would have been very funny. But yeah, shout out to Mike. He can't join us. So okay, so to summarize, we'll go on to the actual podcast now on the line by line autobiography of a yogi. Yogananda visits as young Mukunda, the great yogi Bhaduri Mahasaya, who explains why he confines himself within the walls of his own home, away from the public, and that's a very interesting topic we'll talk about. And then the purpose of meditation that we'll touch on as well. And Yogananda's, he gives us a glimpse really of the yogi's vitality and energy and his humor, despite the sort of his age and outward appearance of stoicism and strictness, let's say. So it's a lovely part of the chapter that we can dive into by looking at this impromptu visit of Mukunda. Now, Mukunda did mention in the first part at the beginning of the chapter that he kind of lived close and he was able to guess the yogi by name whenever a friend asked, like, oh, I saw a saint levitating, you'll never guess who. And then, no, at the drop of a hat, Yogananda just round off the name, said, yeah, he lives close to me. I visit him regularly, just casual. And here he is saying that on his way home, like that afternoon from school, he did pass by this great yogi's house for a visit. So very, very casual. I love the idea of this. Just calls in to, a yogi who's known for levitating. This is a master of yoga, and he's able to visit this person essentially on the doorstep of his own way home. Is fantastic for him. Correct?
Yeah, I read this in English, then I read it in Hindi, and the reason I read it in Hindi is because I'm trying to make my Hindi better, such that I can read the autobiography of a yogi in Hindi. And I was doing that just so when I'm going to India later this year, and I'm going to lots of Hindi-speaking parts, and I wanted to be like a local as opposed to a tourist. Anyway, so I was relearning various Hindi things, and so I was rereading this bit in Hindi, and it's actually a very different feel in Hindi. So they probably would have been speaking Bengali. So firstly, say his name, Chris.
Bhaduri Mahasaya.
Yeah.
Or
So
Mahasaya.
there's an R there, right? But it's spelled Bhaduri. But the actual in Hindi is Bhaduri. Bhaduri Mahasaya.
Bhaduri.
It's like a D-I at the end as opposed to an R. And that's quite cool. So the names actually in English sound quite different to even how I've been pronouncing it in with my Indian bent on it. And then the line is that he decided on a visit, which sounds very casual, but in the Hindi version he said to take darshan, which is a completely different take on it, isn't it? And then he says that there was a lone disciple occupying the floor, and then here in Hindi it says shishya, which is the word for a disciple. So all these like very quite deep words that are in the embedded in the Indian languages, but in English, like a darshan versus a visit is not really a great. But there's no literal translation for darshan.
There
So
not I was just going to chime in
exactly.
saying that, like, it's very hard to translate that.
Exactly, and Guruji obviously done has best with the limited tools that English provides for such profound language. Yeah, and later on he says like his guru, the shishya was waiting for his guru, but in the Hindi he's got his sadguru, which is a true guru, which is like a really nice bent on it. And we say Mukunda, or I've been saying Mukunda all the time, but in India you just say Mukunda. You wouldn't
Yeah,
say
Mukund.
at the end, right? So there's all these little nuances if you go to the actual language, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought it up because it it plays in my mind when I hear these things. Like, am I saying them wrong? Like when I hear Mukund, like when I hear even Mahasaya or Mahesh, I say Mahashaya normally. I'm curious how it's actually pronounced because hearing Mahashaya, I say Sha, so this S normally. But anyway, interesting. Because I heard it pronounced Saya on the Convocation by many of the
It
speakers.
is, yeah, I'll find it.
We'll come back to it. Come
Yeah.
back, circle back. So young Mukunda does make a darshan, pays a visit or makes a darshan, does a darshan. Sorry, between the beauty of the moment there. But he does pay a visit Shah
Shy,
Maheshwar.
yes.
Good.
Shy.
And yes, as Priyank mentions, that there is indeed a lone disciple, as it's written in the English version of the Autobiography of Yogi, at the ground floor of this great yogi's house. And he's described as Martinet. And I actually, again, as I do every single episode when I'm doing research in this, had to Google what that actually meant. Essentially, it's somebody who's fiercely loyal, very disciplined, somebody who's got extreme discipline, and that's a really nice description. I think really coming off the back of Convocation, it was Brother Govindananda, as Priyank mentioned earlier. Very, very good talk on the highest law of loyalty. Loyalty is the highest law. Very comical as well. Worth a listen. Maybe we can link that in the description below as well. Worth a listen if you haven't managed to get around to it yet. So here we have somebody very loyal, and he's sort of rebuking Mukunda's attempt to enter and go up to see the master. And he's saying, essentially, do you have an engagement? Have you made a booking? Very formal. And he's about to sort of kick him out before the guru interjects in a very timely fashion. Correct?
Yeah, this method of like real following the law to the letter versus feeling like what the intention of a law or a rule should be and obeying what is intended, that the greater purpose as opposed to the mundane purpose. Like we have laws that are very mundane, but the actual purpose is to retain order in society, right? That's and harmony. So here he's taking his guru would have told him, I'm very, I need to protect the public, and you need to make sure, people don't, come not anyone just comes in here, and he took that to mean no one can come in without your permission. So
Yeah.
I was wondering, what do you think here the rule should be for us? Should we be, especially in lessons and things like that, should we be following things to the letter, i.e., you have to spend 15 minutes doing this, 20 minutes doing that, 10 minutes doing this in your practices, for example, and you should be doing it twice a day, and you should be doing this at this time, and eating this only, and all that kind of stuff. What do you reckon, Nirisha?
Oh, I actually have a tendency of like looking around the rules. I've always been like that, and ever since I got on the path, I was like, am I gonna let myself do this on the path? Yes. I jumped to say yes, like as a kid, because I was a kid when I started. And I was like, okay, let me try bending the rules as much as I can until I realized the futility of it and how my own limited perception is not letting me get the full hit. And that's why the rules exist for a reason. So I've experienced both actually, and I think both have their own pluses and minuses. And so I'd say both is necessary because ultimately we have to customize our relationship with our journey. So that's what I'm gonna say.
Yeah, I could probably say more in this than what I should, but
I can guess which side of the thing you're going to be on, Chris.
well, I did just say earlier on that, prioritize God and, make plans. And if you make plans, then you should be able to stick to what the Guruji does actually say, right? Not just recommend, but say is really necessary to be able to obtain enlightenment or self-realization in this lifetime. So I understand that, they're there for a reason. Yogananda's prescribed certain paths for us to follow, that's something that we should adhere to. But he does say himself, hey guys, if you can't do the energization exercises, do try to squeeze in these 4 or 5, I can't remember exactly which ones or how many of them. Try to squeeze these ones in, try to do these. Or by the way, if you can't do them mentally. The monks often say that to try to reinforce the practice, even at that level, because they still will have an effect. So I think the SRF actually does have a lot of rules and methods for us to follow, but does a great job to say the world is, Maya is very strong in its demands and of us. So if you can't do it by the letter of, how it's prescribed in the lessons and so on, there are ways around it.
Which is also true for like energization, for example. They say, you should do it like next to a window or outdoors or standing, etc. And then, but if you're bedbound or in a hospital, then you can't do it, right? So they said do it mentally, and you can have a similar, not probably not the exact same impact, but a similar impact. So it allows you this kind of workaround, which is quite nice.
I feel also though it's like we have to really watch ourselves. Is it that we can't, or is it that we don't really feel like it and we're kind of just trying to make it a bit easier for ourselves and not really follow what we know to be right? I've been learning this a lot recently, and just in my own journey, just really realizing that I suffer when I don't do what Guruji tells me to do. And that if someone of God union is saying something, they are much better advised than my own leanings and opinions. So that's my 2 cents on it. But I am more down the Sri Yukteswar disciplinarian route. So I think that just goes more towards
Definitely,
where I lean to. So like Neriksha says, like it's all our own personal relationship, isn't it?
Lauren's told me off many times for crossing the road when the man hasn't gone green.
That's pretty much all I do. I take it as a challenge. It's a challenge you want to try to.
All right, Lauren, you're outnumbered 3-1, Lauren, it would appear.
It's fine. I've often gone against the grain in life.
I'd put my money on Lauren beating us to the punch, let's be honest.
Probably.
Us off-piste goers, we're going to get lost in some sort of remote jungle with some bears and
we're all lost. That's
Quite
why
true.
we're here on this earthly plane.
Yeah, we'll lose the skis somewhere down the line. If you look at the line of gurus that we have to follow, we do have Yogananda, who would be very, how would you say, balanced, with this divine love, motherly love, that he gives us. And then we have Sri Yukteswar, who is that disciplinarian, strict disciplinarian. And then we have the house yogi, in Bhaduri Mahasaya as the example there. Like we have these examples, and we can take the sympathy or the discipline or the practicality of being able to do these things. We actually have that there for us, right? Which is kind of cool when you think about it. And then we have a reference to this very subject in this part that we're going to be covering in chapter 7 as well. So Bhaduri makes a similar sort of comment to Yogananda. Or sorry, is that in the last part? I'm getting confused. I think that might be in the last part where he makes a comment. We'll get to that. We'll get back to this later. But that is part of the conversation with Yogananda and Bhaduri Mahasaya as well, which is pretty cool. So continuing on with the story. So Mukunda has indeed been saved by Bhaduri Mahasaya when he interjects. Essentially, he appears just in time, and I love that comment, just in time. And I don't know, there's no context built in there, but in my own mind, it's like the guru knew that he was, or the yogi knew he was going to be there. Kind of, he knew he was already there, or he comes down the stairs just at the opportune time to save him from ejection, as Yogananda puts it, from the house by this martinet.
Omnipresent, he definitely was. Had this omniscient eye, isn't it? Just in time. Not a coincidence.
Yeah, coincidences do not exist. But either way, whether he overheard Mukunda getting interrogated maybe by the martinet, or he simply knew and he appeared just in time, as Yogananda puts it, he is saved by the yogi, and he says, let Mukunda come when he will. And it's a really lovely little moment there. And his eyes were twinkling, and he makes a very clear comment, really, that is extremely interesting, that he says that, the rule of seclusion is not for his own comfort, but that of others. And I think it's a bit better just to read this out rather than to summarize this. So I'll read out the next couple sentences. So worldly people do not like the candour that shatters their delusions. Saints are not only rare, but disconcerting. Even in scripture, they are often found embarrassing. So there's tons to pull apart there. Frank, I'll come to you first before we delve into this part. Did you have a comment?
Yeah, I did have a comment about the twinkle,
Yep.
Twinkle, twinkle, little star. Certainly has some significance to Guruji, because he uses the word twinkle, the eyes twinkle or twinkle, quite often in the autobiography. This is the second time that he's used the word twinkle, and there's going to be 17 occasions. But each has a significance, and I checked my Hindi autobiography, and the word was jamak. Niriksha. And I don't know if you use that word ever when you're speaking Hindi for eyes, but I certainly don't.
Yeah,
Oh, you do?
it sounds like glitter. It's usually the word chamak is usually used for like something that's glittering or twinkling. So
Do you
it's
ever
like a
use it for
little.
people's eyes?
You
Not
will
yet.
now.
I will know.
So here, there's the sage's eyes twinkled. So the previous example here was it equally. So this is a slightly cheeky scenario, isn't it? Because here two like behemoth gurus have just come into the space and like basically like overwhelmed this poor little shishya with their magnanimity. But previously there was an equally cheeky scenario, because his father, when he was telling him not to run away again, his eyes twinkled when he said, "Mind, no more flights from home," after he found that Shastri Mahashaya, or the saint, to help teach him Sanskrit. So yeah, it's going to be there's going to be more of these twinkle moments, shall we say? But this is a second of some very significant twinkles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he's on first name terms with him, so we know they're very familiar with each other. Let Mukunda come when he will. Yeah, so it's a lovely little moment there, and he just drops this profound knowledge and wisdom that the rule of seclusion is not for his own comfort, but that for others. When I read that, I thought, wow, that's a twist, because that's really not maybe how I perceived why a saint would stay within the confinements of their own home. I didn't really think about this. It didn't occur to me. So he said, worldly people do not like candour. That shatters their delusions. And we can go into this. And I thought, okay, he says, saints are not only rare, but disconcerting. Even in scripture, they're all often found embarrassing. So what does he actually mean by this? my layperson interpretation, I can give it, but maybe Nick, actually, do you have a comment? Maybe we'll switch to you.
Yeah, the moment I heard that, I would often sound embarrassing. And the first thing that came to my mind was, by who? Because there's so many perceptions of saints that there has to be a certain type of perception to deem them specifically as embarrassing. So I dove into like, okay, if I was to find a saint embarrassing, what would my level of consciousness be for that to sound legit? It's so I got into that headspace for like 2, 3 seconds, and I was like, oh, them just live. Because see, usually saints don't usually care about robes and clothes in India, so they kind of look tattered. They kind of look disheveled. That could be the embarrassing part, the physical, like the lack of physical care. For most saints described in scripture. The second thing is, this was back when I was in the second, I think I was 7.1 with Lux. We were talking about Sage Vyasa and how he just ate all of the curd. And that's kind of embarrassing. So like you don't know their antics. So it's like the normal people don't understand because they're so connected with the divine and they have all this huge, vast perceptions of the world. Like for someone normal, they're like, you say, okay, you're weird, dude. Like, nah, I don't know what's going up in your head. So I feel like if you don't really have access to what they have with their connection, that's when you can be like, okay, this dude's weird. I don't like saying this, but I had to step into that headspace to deem this sentence true in quotation marks.
What's your take, Priyank?
I was just wondering if people like candour. It says here worldly people do not like candour. It shatters their delusions. But for us on the spiritual path, it's very easy for us to say we want candour, we want brutal honesty about our flaws.
Weirdly enough, Priyank, I just searched candour and Google gave me your name as the definition. It's just...
Oh, you're joking.
I got you there with that one.
Oh gosh. I thought your computer's broken. But no, I was wondering, on a serious note, how do you deal with relationships that need candour, like need some honesty in terms of if you want to if you know someone's doing something that's harmful or damaging or not in their best interest, you know it, but you at the same time to be to say something with candor, you're going to be pushing them further away. So I was wondering how people deal with this. And I know, like, for example, in lots of the convocation talks, they've said, we can the best influence we can have on anyone is through personal example, and like our own realization is the greatest gift we can give to humanity. That's like the highest form of charity, essentially, is our own realization, self-realization. But it's, if someone's about to walk into a pit, is it not wrong to push them away with a few words of candor if need be?
I actually think if you ask devotees that question, you'll get one answer. And if you ask the regular person who's not a seeker of God or who isn't on a path, you'll get a completely different answer. Generally speaking, I think I value it extremely highly. That's why, I'm joking with you, Priyank, because you know that I love you with all my heart, and I value you incredibly highly with, your candor. I value it very, very much so. And I think that generally people on the path would actually value that. But there's always to which degree, and when it comes to maybe family and friends, there's almost in my books an obligation to be candid, at times. I think if you're candid all the time, you probably become the person that people don't want to be around, because we're so flawed that if you're candid, if you're just highlighting somebody's, issues all 24/7 all the time, you've got to pick your battles on that. But I think for me, like I said, highly valuable, and you'd probably get that answer from most devotees.
Yeah, you do get it, but they're not immune from the virtually exactly the same response that a non-spiritual person would receive, because I've tried this at the center with people that know me very well and I know very well, but they have not reacted very well to it. And and then I get this reputation, which is obviously not good. But so we're not immune to it from even the so-called spiritual people on the path are not immune to this. And it's all very easy to say then. And I even spoke to some monks about it, and the monk said, "Oh, well, if they're reacting so strongly, they need to reflect, for example, on what's causing such a angry response or such a obstructive or destructive response, both within themselves and to other people at the center." But if it's happening, it's just you can't help but if you're going to be the candid person, then
But
you
is
can't
it
help.
wrong for me to specifically want to be called out by you, Priyank? Like, I
That's
don't
a
know. I don't know.
no,
Am I
but
asking for too
if you
much?
ask for it, yeah, and then I do it, and then you then go off and you flip out, then whose fault is that? Mine or
It's
yours?
mine. It is absolutely mine. I have to take that because, it's like I've known you long enough to be like, you know what, he's gonna tell me something. If it's gonna sting, you just hug it out. Like it's gonna sting.
Mhm.
Because I know that if I feel like truth is equivalent to love because love, it is the most highest vibrational frequency, right? And truth is the highest thing, is the highest as well. So I feel like if someone is true, that means they are vibrating at a frequency of love. And why wouldn't you not want that?
I think it's one of the key signs of a true friend.
Yeah.
If you're surrounding yourself with people who aren't ever candid with you, like that's a really, really bad position to be, isn't it? Like you don't want to be surrounded by yes people. Like they're just constantly, constantly, yeah, that's a great idea. Jump off the bridge. Like, so offend that. It's like, that's a terrible idea. You do want that. So,
Mhm.
for sure. I think it's something that Yogananda talked about with Sri Yukteswar. Said it was like to the point of physically painful. He compared it to pulling teeth. That his ego was just being stripped apart by Sri Yukteswar. Every single impurity was being taken from him, and that was the experience that he had with the candour of Sri Yukteswar. So it's necessary even on the journey that we're on. And that's why it's so hard. It's such a hard path, isn't it? It's not easy. You don't look at it, when you talk about the general people of the world, it's not, you don't blame them for not wanting to take it on in a sense, because it's the hardest thing that we can do.
Mhm. And we're obviously not trying to take the role of Sri Yukteswar, but we do what we can. But it's my main point was it's so easy to say you can handle it, but so few people actually do
True.
handle it with grace, and myself included in that. Just had a recent example myself at the center actually, and this in Mukunda in when with Sri Yukteswar, he himself is comparing it to getting teeth pulled out. So this is a Yogananda saying that. So what of us? So we should like take that to take some satisfaction that it's not as easy as it would appear.
And with
Even the masters.
kindness and sympathy for when you might need to be candid, you might need to play that role, right? So we all have roles to play. Like you might need to be that, level of candor, have that level of candor with someone at times. So, yeah,
A
perspective.
lot of people are on the other end of the scale there. They just say, "I'll leave it to God and gurus.
Yeah.
They'll arrange for whatever's meant to happen to happen."
Or you could go into silence, look at the point between the eyebrows, and say, "For God and Guru." And I'm joking with that, but I did want to say here, we have worldly people do not like the candor that shatter their delusions. Like there's a lot that can be said on this, and I just thought of the concept of this is why the great yogi is saying that he is within his own walls and not, allowing just any old person, any general member of the public to come in through the doors and to come up and see him. And, because God knows what they're going to receive, they're going to receive a wake-up call, and it might actually send them in the wrong direction. Because, like you said, people react differently to it. Should they then not have that responsibility to look inwardly to say, well, why did I react badly to that? The answer to that in my books is that people simply, most of us, don't have that 100% of the time, and then the general public have that less than maybe what we might have that, to that degree, being devotees. So yeah, that degree of which you might actually cause damage is probably more in this yogi's case, that you have to be very specific. And the thought that came to mind was, okay, well, when the student's ready, the teacher appears. So when you're actually say, okay, I'll take it, I'll take the criticism, or the I'll get my teeth pulled. I know I've got to do it, for the benefit of myself. So then the teacher arrives. But the ante to this, in some sense, is Jesus and his life. When he went out, he died on the cross for essentially being candid, in some sense, like telling it how it is, and standing against the Roman Empire, emperor at the time, who was, deemed God by, themselves, by that society at the time, right? So he was being blasphemous, and had to pay the price, and all that story as it unfolded. I mean, that's an example of true sacrifice by a great yogi, by Jesus, that we know of. So that's probably that sort of duality, that there's different roles that we, the yogis play for us that we can take from.
Yeah, but in Christ, in that example, he he just said, "Forgive them," right? He didn't say, "What are you doing? You're going to cause your own downfall and damnation, and thousands of more incarnations you're going to have to live to be stabbing or poking an avatar." So he did it that way, and that is an avatar response, isn't it? I was trousing through the recesses of my mind to find a scriptural response to this, these three sentences, i.e., this candour that shatters delusions, and people finding it disconcerting, and in scripture. He's mentioned two or three things. So in Hindu law, there's lots of examples, but Guruji doesn't talk about them specifically. But the best example I could think about was from the Mahabharata, and Guruji does hint at this example in various places, and there's four principal characters that he talks about, and the ones that we're going to deal with are this is so the main character that we're going to talk about that falls into this category, where his delusions are shattered, but he doesn't respond in the right way. So the ones we're talking about is Karna. Karna is one of the Kauravas, so he's fighting against the the five Pandavas. Then there's Arjuna, and so we're going to talk about Karuna, his story, his backstory. Talking about Arjuna, who's also important. We're going to talk about Draupadi, who's also important in this, and talk about Kunti, who's also important in this. So Arjuna, we know, is the principal, disciple, the guru disciple relationship, and God talks with Arjuna. Draupadi is the wife of the five brothers. Kunti is the mother of all the five brothers, and she's also the mother of Karna. So Karna is actually is a half brother of the Pandavas. And then we're also going to talk about Duryodhana, who is effectively the principal bad guy in the Mahabharata. But each of these names, so I've said five names here that this story is going to be relevant for. Each of these names have got a very subtle meaning, both in terms of how their names are composed and what it metaphorically means. And Guruji describes this in beautiful detail in literally the first section of the God Talks with Arjuna. And I think the first 100 pages is just replete with Sanskrit references to names and symbology and metaphorical meanings. But yeah, those 5 characters. Niriksha, can you just tell us what each of those 5 characters are and what they represent?
Yeah, absolutely. So the warriors, Karna and Vikarna, they signify attachment to material action, habitual tendencies, and repulsion to what is disagreeable at the root of likes and dislikes. Arjuna is divine self-control and the vibratory fire element. Also, I want to say usually it's Arjuna, and also like a modern day name is just Arjun. So if you meet somebody named Arjun, hey, you can just give him a shout out about his name. Draupadi is the common wife of the 5 Pandavas, right? And she personifies the life force in the body that's coiled, centralized in the spine, and referred to as Kundalini. So Draupadi is basically Kundalini, and the Pandavas are the 5 senses. So that's actually I did not know that until now. So I'm kind of surprised that I found out about this. This is awesome. Oh my gosh, wow.
It's pretty profound.
Very profound, very exciting to even just share this. And Kunti, so the word ku is to call. Is Kunti is the ardent devotee's spiritual power to invoke the aid of the creative life force in his sadhana. Kunti, as this Drupada, represents the devotee's passion for the world and longing for God, which during meditation reserves the outward flowing of life force and to concentrate within. Duryodhana, oh my gosh, this is on a side note, my mom was like, did you conquer your Duryodhans today? Like, so it's kind of leaning onto the meaning, which is material desire. So my mom would tell me, if you've conquered the Duryodhans, that's good, you're doing good. So Duryodhana is material desire, and first his mother rejects him, and then Draupadi, and then he embraces.
No. I'm gonna get to that. So Duryodhana, just describe what Duryodhana is.
Oh, he's just material desire. I
Yes.
mean, my mom freaking always tells me like.
Right. So those are the 5
Yeah.
characters. And remember, I think I told you guys, so all the Mahabharata is interwoven into the Indian culture. So as Niriksha was saying, did you conquer your Duryodhanas today? So it's so sweet how it's it's all embedded. But yeah, so 5 principal characters. So it's important. So you got Karna, who everyone feels sorry for because he's a half brother of the 5 brothers, the 5 Pandavas. So he really should be on the good side, but something happens, and I'll describe what happens. And then we've got Arjuna, which is the principal disciple, and we've got Draupadi, which is the Kundalini, the life force. So she represents the the upsurge of energy that binds the 2 brothers, holds the 5 brothers together, and propels the spiritual path for a devotee. Kunti, effectively divine mother, and Duryodhana is the bad guy. So Arjuna, so the story from Karna's perspective. So what happens is that his mother is actually Kunti, and what happened? There's a whole backstory, but essentially she has to let Karna go. So immediately you feel sorry for him because your birth mother's let you go, and he's had to get raised by another tribe, as it were. So he's actually a prince, yeah. And so, but his mother's had to let him go for whatever reason. And then Draupadi, so Draupadi, before she got married, there's this process called a Swayambara. So what that means is through the skill of the prospective grooms that are all arrayed, the wife or the wife to be the girl can pick who she wants to be husband. So Arjuna came to this. So it's a very official, grand affair, much like the Tiger Swami bout. Like everyone's there, and it's like she's the girl picked. So Draupadi, she's the most sought after bride in the whole of the Bharatvarsha, this area of India. So she's like this most eligible bride that basically if you secure this bride, your family is going to be prosperous. So and one of the criteria that Draupadi would use to select her husband is who's the mightiest, who's the greatest in terms of their capability to fight off evil tendencies. So Karna was actually an archer that was of equal skill to Arjuna. Arjuna was the greatest archer in the history of man, probably even till now, and Karna was his equal. So Karna actually was capable of, fighting Arjuna or anyone, but he wasn't. At the time, it wasn't known that he wasn't a prince. He wasn't of a princely lineage, but Arjuna was known as of a princely lineage. So Draupadi rejected Karna and basically put a garland around Arjuna, and then Draupadi became, Arjuna's wife, and there's that whole backstory. So there's that. So now Karna is in this position where a divine personage such as Draupadi has essentially been candid in whichever way, in some symbolic way, and chosen not to go with him. Now he's got these two options now, whether he can now rise to the occasion and grow from this or turn spiteful. And which side do you think he picks? He picks the spite. So he basically he gets so angry, he gets so caught up in this that he says, not only am I not going to accept this loss is an injustice because X, Y, Z, and I'm going to end Arjuna. I'm going to be the one that defeats Arjuna because I'm better than him. And not only that, I'm going to then also disgrace Draupadi. Yeah, so he's got this level of anger and resentment towards this scenario of being rejected. So for whatever reason, he's now picked this path. And Sri Yukteswar, Lauren, has talked about what this energy represents. So would you want to read that out?
Love to. It says, my guru, Sri Yukteswar, noted the significance of the name Karna in a play of words, common in the Hindu scriptures, in which the word Karna means also the helm of a ship. Thus, this consciousness represented as Karna may at this pivotal point be steered either inward through the door of the spiritual eye into the astral spine with its centers of divine awareness, or outward into the sensory nerves and material consciousness. Having chosen to side with the forces of the sense mind, the Karna attachment to material pleasure, along with his brother in arms, the Karna, the Kuru, carries on its materialistic propensities in the subtle lumbar chakra of the spine, in opposition there to its arch enemy, the Arjuna divine power of self-control.
So Karna then became friends with whom? Duryodhana. And not because he had any affinity for Duryodhana, only so he could avenge Arjuna and Draupadi for this incident that's happened. And then what happened was when this whole battle was commenced and everyone was picking sides. Now Krishna knew this whole backstory that Karna is actually the half brother of the Pandavas, and his mum's actually Kunti, so he actually is of princely lineage. So during the battle, when everyone was picking their sides, Karna went with that side. Krishna thought, okay, let me have some mercy. He brought him into his court, and Krishna said to him, you're actually the half brother. Your mother is actually Kunti. This and happened. So you actually belong here. You're one of us, essentially. And what does Karna do? The hand of grace is extended to him, but he still can't get over this whole, thing that's happened. And he goes and fights with Duryodhana. and then there's a whole end of the story where obviously he's defeated. But this is the power of Maya, and this is how far it can take you away from the path, even if the guru has come to intervene at various points. But pride and delusions are sometimes so strong. So you can read more about Karna and his lineage and his how how he attained his powers of invincibility and things like that. In the God Talks with Arjuna, Guruji is like hasn't put it all in one place, so you'd have to like search it, but it's all there.
Nice. Yeah, thanks for pulling that out. I did think to myself before, it's such a big topic to jump into that. This is just what we find doing what we're doing, is that there's so many great topics and learnings and wisdom in the book that Yogananda is just planted there for us, isn't he? So awesome. Yeah, thanks Prank for delving into that for us. But by the way, I did just want to go back, my take on the last few sentences there, but that we read out. My rule of seclusion is not for my own comfort. Whenever I read that, saints are not only rare but disconcerting. Even in scripture, they are often found embarrassing. I actually thought that was not embarrassing, that the saints are embarrassing, that actually it's the people become embarrassed.
I thought so as well.
That's how I read that.
That's how I thought as well.
Maybe, I don't know, if you read it in Hindu, did it actually give any?
Not actually. I need to reread that then.
Yeah. Well, maybe we can come back to it. But I mean, I took that you're probably going to embarrass a lot of people if you just say, here's the truth, here's the candid sort of reality about your life, and you've got to turn it around or something. That's
this is what I thought of Karna, actually, because he was so embarrassed by these different occasions of his life, and we've all got these moments in our lives that we found embarrassing, but we either get over them or put them to the side, or rather than let them eat at us for the rest of our days in this incarnation.
And I'm just searching, there's a beautiful painting about the fall of Lucifer, the fall of Satan. I'm trying to find it here, done by, it's 400 years ago, 500 years ago. And it's this beautiful, beautiful pictures that, fall of an angel. And, Lucifer's there, and he's got these tears, and it's famous, this painting, because of the beauty in how they depict what the fallen angel is actually feeling. And it's just what you described. It's this sense of betrayal, sense of revenge, this fury. And there it is there. Let's see if I can pull up. Anyway, I'll not go into this too long because we could talk about this forever. Satan the accuser and Lucifer the light bearer. But the listeners might know it because it's Lucifer looking up in this sense of rage and fury, with a tear coming out of his eye. And I could just picture that whenever you're reading and telling us the story, Frank, and whenever we were going through that, I could just picture that look, that sort of demonic look of inner torture, and that develops. It's such a powerful lesson to not go down that road and don't become that. So cool hearing about this, that this is interwoven in society in India. That you guys fall. So cool. Very jealous, envious maybe. So let's continue with the autobiography, with the part chapter 7. So we have Mukunda then entering into the inner sanctuary of the austere quarters on the top floor. Now, I don't know how many floors, or what the description of the house is. Maybe we know where the house is, what it looks like, but that is described as is where the masters, sort of the yogi, seldom stirred. So he was there, staying indoors, as Mukunda puts it here. He actually mentions to the yogi, "You're the first yogi I have known to always stay indoors." And I just thought this was very sort of candid, sort of informal, casual sort of take for Mukunda to say to somebody who's, so realized, oh, you're the first yogi I've known to, somebody who stays indoors. And of course he means it in a very genteel, respectful way. But I just laughed to myself when I read it. Like, he sort of says what he sees in a sense. And there's beauty in the innocence and in the truth in it. But sorry, just before that, jumping ahead there, there's a very beautiful couple sentences there where, again, I'll just read. Masters often ignore the panorama of the world's ado, out of focus till centered in the ages. The contemporaries of a sage are not only those of the narrow present. And I actually had to take a minute or two to really try to figure out what exactly is he saying here. And it's quite beautiful, really. He simply says that, because the majority of us don't have the sort of deep understanding of the human condition and, these universal truths that sort of transcend time and space that we maybe don't get, just as you're saying, Nick. We don't understand really what a saint is doing and why they're doing it and how they're doing it, and it kind of goes over our heads. It kind of goes, we don't understand everything. Oh, that's a bit weird, or something. We judge it or something, and then we move on. But actually, these truths, and we've said it so many times about Yogananda, what he says ages well. It's actually captured in time because it's timeless, and the truth is timeless. So it's a really beautiful couple lines there that is food for thought.
The first line, that masters often ignore the panorama of the world's ado. Shout out to the book Much Ado About Nothing. Once I last heard the word ado. But I thought this is a lesson for us, because obviously Guruji is putting it in there, and we need to become like Yogananda and become like Bhaduri Mahasaya. And we also need to ignore the panorama of the world's ado. And that's not ignore it in the sense that be blasé about it and not inform ourselves with the happenings of the world, but just not to be bogged down and weighed by it such that it's affecting our own enlightenment. So it happens, and what we do about it is we offer, the worldwide prayer circle and things like that. But we don't need to get weighed down by it and go, fight all the injustices that are happening around us. We have the highest purpose. Our purpose is to get out of here. That's our purpose, isn't it, Nick?
I was gonna say, I wanted to go back to the first quote about how Bhaduri Mahasaya was just hanging out on this little the top floor. It actually reflects where I'm at right now, because I moved I used to live in a forest and I planned to stay there until December. And I was like, oh my gosh, I have my meditation cave. This is awesome, and I get to like smell nature. And then I was like, you know what, I should be in the city for work. And LA is not really the best place for nature. And I'm usually indoors and like concrete four walls, and I was like, oh, I got like bogged down about it. I was like, wait, no, I'm being tested. I have to make my nature. I need to make my own little cave over here. And I was like, but then I was kind of fighting with Guruji. I was like, why'd you put me here? I was happy over there, and like, I was whining at him. And then I was like, okay, you better give me a sign this week that you want me to be here and I have to be here and you're watching out for me. And this shows up, and I was like, okay, this is him being like, hey, I got you. You're going through this for a reason, and just have fun with it. So.
Wow. The brazenness of youth, eh? Giving Guruji's ultimatums. This is groundbreaking. Groundbreaking.
I don't know. I oh my gosh. I treat him like a friend. But then sometimes I get serious too. But it's like, talk to him all the time, right? So
Yeah, I need to learn that lesson.
I'm all for it. Make commands of God storm the gates of heaven.
Which touches the last sentence that Chris read out, which is the contemporaries of a sage are not only those of the narrow present. This is a really profound line. Is it just me? The contemporaries
Yeah.
of a sage are not only those of the narrow
You know,
present.
it actually stirs emotion in me of gratitude. Like, wow, God, we're so ungrateful. They're right, God's messages are right there in front of us, and we're like, meh, I want to drink my coffee, you know, tune on Netflix. I don't know, do some distract ourselves, irritate ourselves. It's just right there for us. You've made me actually quite emotional reading that. Like, gosh, got a lot of work to do.
It's so much. It's so comforting, though, isn't it? Like the timelessness of the avatar, in the sense that we always think of time as linear and personalities come and go, but a sage transcends this linear misconception or basic conception of our existence. But they're omnipresent and here in every moment, from back then to the future. So Christ is and Babaji are, we in SRF and YSS we kind of romanticize the relationship between the ever present Babaji and the Christ consciousness that is the basis of our vibratory creation. But it's, this line just says the truth. It just like hums why that's so true.
Yeah. And he just slides it in, doesn't he? And the context is perfect. He's just saying, here's a saint who you would just walk past the door, of somebody who's self-realized. You would never know he's there for your own protection, because you're so ignorant that you're going to take something that he says and just, turn into, one of these characters that you become self-destructive, right?
But also, he could be doing those pranayams, what they called Niriksha, and he could be doing those, and there could be a storm happening, and you could walk in, and then, like in the X-Men, you could get pounded next to the wall.
Yeah.
And it was plastica, right?
Nice.
Yeah.
I knew there was a reason why we invite you back every time.
Smile and charm as well.
Yeah. Oh yeah, of course.
Gracious with your presence. And so we have the response, and it's so humble. And he says that, God plants his saints sometimes in unexpected soils, lest we think we may reduce him to a rule. And it is just so beautiful, that, isn't it? Like, it's nothing to do with me. I don't have a personal preference to be here. In fact, he maybe would personally have wanted the opposite, to be in the Himalayas, to be, somewhere else, but the four walls to be confined. But he's obviously in rapture and, in bliss and samadhi. So what does it matter, really? But I'm sure if he had a preference, maybe he would be doing something else. But he's talking about God. God puts him there, and that we shouldn't reduce God to a rule. Very, full of humility, that sentence, I thought.
I'd like to highlight something. I don't have any particular opinion on it, but I find it just curious. So Mukunda addresses him as Maharishi, which means great sage, but then he replies and refers to himself as his saints. I have no opinion on it. I don't think anything was inferred, but it was interesting. And then that whole, God plants his saints sometimes in unexpected soil, lest we think we may reduce him to a rule. I love it. I love it so much because, I think we can, as humans, we can get this idea of, okay, well, what is a saint? And it can appear very outwardly, they live in such and such conditions and this is how they dress. And I think actually there is a really deep meaning here that, God's creative power is infinite and it looks so different and it is so different. And there is no rule when it comes to God because he is. And that's something to remember, I feel.
Yeah, I just read the Hindi translation of his saints. God sometimes plants his saints, And there's a Hindi or an Indian word for saint, which is sant. So and he's put apne santo. So it's like this word. It's so true. He's being so humble, isn't he? He's not. He's declining the Maharishi title, which is a very elevated title, and santo is a very common. A saint is, anyone that's adorned the saffron color is generally referred to as a saint, sant or a saint. I suppose that the origin of the Western English word of saint is probably from the same word as sant. Yeah, Chris.
Yeah, I was just going to say the same thing, essentially, that the sage is really somebody who's wise, and he's declining that, So it's yeah, part of that
And
humility.
and in third person as well. He's referring to himself in third person, so there's no sense of I. He's just a pawn on the cosmic
Yeah.
chessboard.
Yeah, beautiful. And I loved the idea. It was like, whoa, how many other saints are just locked up in the apartments here in Milan, or who knows? Like they could be everywhere and they're anywhere. It kind of filled me with like I need to be receptive to. I might be able to stumble in to saint's home somehow, because I'm just walking around and exploring the city, and I kind of thought to myself, all right, okay, I'm going to be on it and do my chants and stuff, and maybe I can come across a saint.
Well, but very well spotted, Lauren. Because I read this and I knew there was something there, but I couldn't. It didn't come out, and I love that you've brought it out. And Nidiksha, similarly, earlier you were saying your mum, like, have you tackled your Duryodanas today? I love it. It's there, but it's in within each of us, and when we bring it out together in this environment, it just it adds so much texture to and color to just 15 paragraphs.
Mhm.
Oh. And so the saints get down to business. They meditate, and this is another beautiful part where Yogananda describes the great Maharishi. I'll call him that if he won't call himself that. The sage is described here by Yogananda, locked his vibrant body in a lotus posture. And he mentioned that he's in his 70s, he's older, but he hasn't had any signs of this sedentary life. So we can break those parts down quite extensively, really, but we'll touch on them to begin with. Priyank,
Yeah, so firstly, they're locked in lotus posture. Locked is the operative word. So the actual asana is called Padmasana. And if anyone's ever tried it, where like your ankle goes onto your thigh and the other ankle goes over that and goes onto the other thigh, and then if you can actually pull it off and then actually sit down, you'll see that that half is it probably is in pain, but it's not moving. It's more than a physical lock. You're anchored to the ground. So it's a very apt use of verbology there of describing what posture they were following.
I can do one. Get one ankle up there.
That's called Ardha Siddhasana.
Do you know when I first started meditating, I couldn't even sit, I can sit on the floor, I can do anything. So I can do a little bit now. So a lot of patience and breathing work. You can work wonders with all the stiffness.
Lauren
Lauren
and I were working with our postures, weren't we? Just
Yes,
2 days
thank
ago.
you.
Yeah. Oh, nice. So Yogananda is, making comment on the age of the yogi, saying that he's not showing any signs of aging really in his later years, and he was stalwart and straight. I love that description. That he's ideal in every respect, and he even goes to the extent to say that his face was that of a rishi, and it made me think, as described in ancient texts, and it made me think, is there a stereotype that actually applies? Because Yogananda looks very much different to Sri Yukteswar, for example. That the impression that you get from looking at the face. So it did make me curious to think, is there something to that, and what exactly is it?
He's made himself somewhat of a hybrid Yogananda, though, because if you see him in his youth, especially when he's doing his school stuff in Ranchi, there's pictures of him, and he's got a full beard and he's got wild hair, curly locks and stuff, and he looks just like one of those mystics that that you'd see and talk about. That's mentioned in the ancient texts, but then he's obviously gone to America. And then he's made some compromises, clean shaven. Yeah, we've never then seen him with a beard, but long hair. There's some metaphysical background around the retention of hair for Hindus and Sikhs actually as well, especially for people that are on the spiritual path. And I love the touching onto the everlasting or eternal youth concept or paradigm here, that there was no signs of sedentary life, and that he was essentially quite pleased. There was no unpleasing signs of age, and there's something that we work toward during our practices in energization, as well as the after effects of meditation as well. So it's in the very prayer, isn't it? O eternal youth of body and mind, abide in us forever and forever.
Nice. It is, yeah. There's so much here that we can pull apart and go into, but I'm mindful of time. We're kind of pushing on, and I want to be respectful of the listeners, but cover as much as we can in as much detail as possible. But if you have any comments on this, I thought it was noteworthy. Maybe even a bit of artistic flair is what I wrote down when he said, Yogananda said his face was that of a rishi, but I think very much so that the aspects that he's mentioned, the stalwart and straight and ideal in every aspect, is noble-headed, abundantly bearded. These are the aspects of the signs of a rishi, right? That in India, for sure, but carried over all around the world. So we have the saints. They go into a meditative state, and they spend over an hour, and that I'm sure probably went in pretty quickly with the two of them in their enlightened states together. I'll pause, Priyank.
I love that there was no announcements of going or let's shall we meditate now, like there is in our services. Like you'd do a chant for 5 minutes and then you'd remind everyone that we're about to go meditation. So we'd like meditation. You'd whisper it, and then everyone would know that, oh yeah, now's the time to meditate. But here there was no such thing. They were obviously in divine communion, and they just entered the meditation straight away, which also brings me to the point that perhaps the previous discussion, i.e., God puts his saints, God places his saints in weird and wonderful places, essentially, is the previous line, isn't it? Maybe they actually had a bit of a moment, kind of a interiority moment, we're going to call it. So we had one of our listeners suggested that we have this moments, we called it like moments of reflection or interiorization or contemplative. So we were coming up with a word for it. So one of our listeners has now come up with a word, which is interiority moment. So let's call it that. So when he said God plants his saints sometimes in unexpected soil, perhaps he then rolled his eyes up, had his interiority moment, and then they both went into the meditation quite quickly. And perhaps even just before that, then Mukunda took 1 minute before and joining him in the meditation. He was actually looking at him, looking at how pleasing his form is, how lovely his posture is, and all that kind of stuff.
And gently, the yogi roused Yogananda. So Yogananda probably could have and wanted to go on for much longer, but it made me think as well that he's just coming out of school and he's dropped by and he's, casually there, so, or not, maybe not casually actually, as we find out, and he's there and meditating for over an hour, and I thought, I wonder what his demands of getting home were. At a certain time you have to, all that practicality of the mundaneness of life. Yogananda probably could have happily sat and meditated for a lot longer with the yogi, but then there's a lovely part here where Yogananda is spoken to, and he Bhaduri Mahasaya says, "You often go into the silence." So it's a lovely recognition there. You're doing a lot of meditation, right? But he challenges him and he says, have you developed anubhava? And anubhava is the actual perception of God. And Yogananda says that he was reminding me to love God more than meditation. And Bhaduri Mahasaya says, do not mistake the technique for the goal. So this, to me, I was thinking about this earlier on, it is a really significant moment, isn't it? Because with Convocation, there was a part in Convocation where, yes, there's the technique. Yes, we have a lot of guidance in SRF, and that's absolutely fantastic. And we're really told this is the path and how to get there. The instructions are there. But then you don't want to get obsessed by that and forget about the devotion and love, and that will get you there quicker. So we should follow the rules, but we have to blend it with this additional element, which is the real sort of rocket fuel. I'll get us there and propel us much quicker. So Yogananda is telling us this for us to learn it through him, right? So it's a lovely bit that he includes there for us.
Yeah, Chris, if you recall, just a few weeks ago, we were comparing notes on meditation and how long we should spend doing this and that, and I can't remember if it was me or you that actually just said, like, meditation is the means, the we spend time after the practice. You spend time in the stillness and essentially trying to attain to anubhava, which is so important, isn't it? So like every practice that we do, and we'll call that a meditation. So we may do Hong So, which is the meditation, but after the Hong So we try and attain this anubhava, which is which when we do that in the stillness. And then we might do the Om meditation after 5-10 minutes of that, and then we may then go back to trying to attain this anubhava. Then we may do kriya, then go back to it, and apparently you should spend the longest time in the last phase of your meditation. So after you finish that last phase of meditation, you spend the longest amount of time in this state where you're in stillness and trying to feel the anubhava.
Yeah, it's a good reminder. And here's young Mukunda being reminded of it himself by this great yogi, great rishi. And he, in the end, sort of ushers him home, and he offers him some mangoes. And of course, we know they're Guruji's favorite fruit, the mango, which is mine as well. I absolutely love it to death, really. I absolutely love mangoes. So he gives him a very apt gift, and he says then, really, for with good humored wit, that Yogananda was very fond of. Bhaduri Mahasaya says people are in general more fond of Jala yoga than dhyana yoga, and in the book it says Jala yoga is union with food, and dhyana yoga is union with God. So this really tickled Guruji, and he roared with laughter. But whenever I was Googling, I didn't really know much about Jala yoga, if that's how to pronounce it. Jala yoga, union with food. I got a completely different sort of take on it. So maybe some sort of discrepancy that we can kind of look at. Jala yoga, when I looked at it, was more about water fasting. It literally means water cleansing, the word jala, rather than strictly to do with food. It's in the same sort of ballpark. You're consuming something. And it confused me a little bit. So if we have any takes on it, please enlighten me, gang. Priyank, you've got your hand up, so I'll come to you.
Yeah, well, the literal interpretation, i.e., the union with food, is certainly one that resonates because even though India is famous for spirituality and yogis, it's also famous for love of food.
Yeah.
Like, so many of our uncles and grandfathers and stuff, they love their food so much that their bellies are barely they're so big that their legs can barely sustain the weight, yet they keep going. So in India, there's this serious paradox where, on the one hand, we've got people fasting on nothing but ether, and on the other, we've got this equal and opposite.
Up around the world, I think the latter part of that. Lauren?
Firstly, I love this balance between meditation and mangoes. It's brilliant. They've been in the spiritual plane and in reality for a while, and then they, enjoy the material. But I have to say, I also found his comment about union with food, people preferring union with food rather than union with God, absolutely hilarious, because it's so relatable. When we reflect on it, how many times in our meditations have we perhaps cut one short because we're hungry, or our stomach's rumbling and we're concentrating on that rather than God? And it just made me laugh a lot. But it does make you think, doesn't it? What is more important? Are you really gonna tend to your stomach more than God? Take the Sri Teshwar approach, but we're all human. But yeah, I found it interesting.
Yeah, but also we sometimes we dedicated a long practice of meditation, or for example, there's a social sometimes after a Sunday service. The food just tastes phenomenal because you've like churned the meditation ether, and now you can really enjoy the fruits, the literal fruits of your labor, which is really nice.
Buddha, I think after he became enlightened, I think the first thing that he said was, "Let's eat," because he was strict disciplinarian, sort of tortured himself a bit and kind of realized actually you can enjoy these things, right? Which was really nice.
But Lauren's definitely right though, because if you observe people that leave a restaurant and then observe some people leaving a church, there'll be a marked difference between the happiness the two and the satisfaction.
Yeah.
I mean, they could be happy that they left the service. That's over, finally. I can go eat.
To go to the restaurant. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I think, when we met in Sundays in London, I've got fond memories of leaving, the Sunday service, then going with you guys, having food after it. I mean, we were always buzzing, chatting away, talking about God and Guru and this and SRF and everything in between. So I guess maybe it depends on the intent and everything behind it all, right? And the Bhaduri Mahasaya comments that Guruji's laugh was quite impressive, and an affectionate gleam came into his gaze. So he's really, Yogananda's really sort of given us this impression that whilst he's this stalwart, rishi, and he's in isolation, he's really got this sense of humor and this, beautiful energy and love coming from him, that Yogananda really is quite fond of himself. So the two of them are enjoying each other's company. So he makes a comment. I'll pause here before I go on. Actually, Priyank, do you have anything to jump in?
Yeah. What do you think, Niriksha? Can you do an impression for us? What that roar, that laugh that Guruji did, what it actually sounded like?
Oh my gosh, I don't think I have the vocal range to do this.
I've heard you sing. Your vocal range is pretty sweet.
but you're willing to try. I think that's what
But do
you're
you
saying.
ever laugh as if no one's watching, or with
I mean, as for me,
complete abandon?
I sound like a pterodactyl, so that's like
What does that sound? What does that sound like?
Oh
it's like
yeah.
a I can't even do it now because like I've been put on the spot for it. It's like a
You're practicing your pranayamas.
yeah, but it's a form of pranayama, I guess.
I have to say, I have this habit of just cackling super loud now, and I have no qualms about it because life is so short on this earthly plane. If you're gonna, if you find something funny, just go for it.
But
Oh my
it's
gosh.
like a unique identifier, isn't it? I don't think we have similar laughs, and that's great. Like there's many,
Mm.
famous people that they're kind of famous for their laugh and makes them stand out and stuff. So
Yeah, I mean, I love my sisters. So, her laugh is usually more funnier than the joke. Like, I'll just laugh because she's laughing. Like, that's
true, genuine laughter is contagious, right? And that's something that really sets us apart from other life forms on Earth as well. So
yeah.
So there's an ecstatic smile. Guruji's describing Bhaduri Mahasaya with, and his large, I love this, his large lotus eyes held a hidden divine laughter. And that's such a lovely line there, isn't it? So he obviously was super affectionate toward this master, this true yogi. And that's where we'll end, with that lovely note there from Yogananda on this chapter, his visit to Bhaduri Mahasaya's lovely home, his austere home, filled with magic and wonder and love and mangoes and all sorts of things. So we'll end it there. Thanks for tuning in. Maybe guys, anything to add before we call it a day?
Divine laughter. I really like that last line.
Yeah.
More chamak or twinkling, maybe. Twinkling
Nice.
moment.
Yeah, conquer your Duryodanas. It's a daily battle.
Thank you very much, people. It's been lovely today.
Jai Guru.
Jai Guru.
Jai Guru.